Lu Sheng, dragging his suitcase behind him, followed the GPS on his phone through the bustling royal capital. Along the way, he saw many young students just like him, with backpacks on their shoulders and suitcases in their hands, eagerly to start a new stage of their lives. As Lu Sheng passed by the entrances of various martial arts universities, he saw lively scenes everywhere he went. Soon, he arrived at the entrance of a university and stopped in his tracks. It was the 7th Divine Martial University. Unlike the other martial arts universities he had seen, the entrance to the 7th Divine Martial University was quite deserted. However, the university itself was enormous. At the entrance of the 7th Divine Martial University stood a gate towering hundreds of meters wide and 100 meters tall. On the gate, there were a few gilded characters, none other than the 7th Divine Martial University. The signature below was Tan Zhongyue. The first impression that the 7th Divine Martial University gave to Lu Sheng was one of surprise, especially the sign personally inscribed by a martial saint at the entrance, and the prominent divine tower, which gave off a feeling of looking up at majestic mountains. Lu Sheng suddenly felt that this might not be a waste of time after all. Perhaps this trip to the university could bring him some interesting events. He then walked towards the welcoming reception at the entrance of the school. Under a welcoming banner, several young men and women were doing their own things. The deserted welcoming reception finally had a visitor. A blonde girl eagerly took Lu Sheng's admission notice. After a quick glance, her eyes lit up rapidly. She called over her friend sitting next to her and pointed at Lu Sheng, saying, "This guy is the national top scorer of this year's unified exam." The young man who was polishing his sword stopped to listen, and they all became curious about the handsome freshman in front of them, as this was the first time the 7th Divine Martial University had admitted the national top scorer. The young man holding a great sword sized up Lu Sheng from head to toe, squinting his eyes. He then jumped up, sword in hand, and landed in front of Lu Sheng. When he asked if Lu Sheng was indeed the top scorer of the year, Lu Sheng wasn't startled. He smiled and assured me, "Absolutely genuine." Just as Lu Sheng was about to ask the young man about where the student dormitory was, the young man raised his great sword and fiercely swung it down at Lu Sheng. Lu Sheng remained still. He didn't even blink, as he calmly and smilingly looked at the young man. The young man slowly nodded, then lifted his great sword and pointed in a direction, telling Lu Sheng to keep walking inside and that there would be signs along the way. Lu Sheng, without any fuss, picked up his suitcase and headed towards the direction. As Lu Sheng's figure gradually disappeared into the distance, the three began to talk. They were all very curious about Lu Sheng. The young man asked what Lu Sheng's score was on the unified exam. One of the girls searched for a while but couldn't find the information. However, a serious expression appeared on her face as she said, "Rumor has that the national top scorer this year had blood energy level at the 6th level, while also broke quite a few records during the exam." The young man with the great sword was somewhat shocked. The other girl also opened her mouth in surprise, anticipating that there would be an interesting show to watch later on. As Lu Sheng entered the campus, he recalled the information he had read about the university. However, as he walked along, he hardly saw anyone. The lush campus seemed almost empty, as if he was the only one walking there. Suddenly, a chubby student spotted Lu Sheng and ran towards him. He introduced himself as Lin Zhe, also a freshman, and complained that he had been walking for half an hour without seeing a single person. Like Lu Sheng, Lin Zhe was laden with a suitcase and backpack. Smiling, the chubby boy said he was very bad with directions and asked if Lu Sheng could help him find the student dormitory. Looking at Lin Zhe, Lu Sheng was reminded of his high school bestie, Ming, and felt a natural liking for the chubby boy in front of him. Lu Sheng smiled and agreed to help. At the entrance of a spacious residential area, a large group of young boys, clearly new students, were gathered, dragging their luggage behind them. Their faces showed a touch of youthful looks and showcased their pride. However, at this moment, there was a hint of anger in their eyes. A student grunted as it was sent flying, landing heavily on the outskirts of the crowd. The young man lifted his head, his face filled with shock and terror, and a barely noticeable hint of fear in his eyes as he looked at the person who just sent him flying. A tall young man in an orange outfit was clapping his hands with a smile. looking at the student on the ground and speaking, "Xu Xiaoming, the martial arts top scorer from Nanjiang province, right? You really do have some skills. You're the first one who's been able to take 2 of my attacks. Keep working hard, and with a bit more breakthrough, you might just make it inside." The young man made an encouraging thumbs-up gesture and acted like he was sincerely cheering him on, but the sarcasm and mockery in his tone were obvious. The surrounding crowd of freshmen all showed a hint of fear. So far, no one has managed to enter the dormitory area. A blue-haired young man turned to his friend beside him and asked in a low voice, "Huodong, do you think you can handle it?" The young man, Huodong, had a clean cut with a handsome face. He had a mature and calm demeanor. Huodong, the 5th top scorer in the National Unified Examination, and the 3rd top scorer from the royal capital, shook his head and admitted that he was not very confident. He had only recently become a 5th-level martial artist. But at this moment, Huodong's face also showed seriousness and worry. Huodong stared intently at the young man in the orange shirt, speaking in a concerned voice. "This guy is very strong, probably already at the peak of 5th level, and with minor achievement in Gangqi, a form of internal energy in martial arts." He took a deep breath and admitted that he might not be able to withstand more than 3 attacks against him. Perhaps Huodong would have a chance if his elemental control talent breaks through to level 3, but right now... Huodong shook his head, choosing not to continue his sentence. The young man beside him couldn't believe what he was hearing. Even their strongest, Huodong, couldn't withstand more than 3 attacks. He gritted his teeth and suggested that they could wear him down, taking turns to fight him, then let Huodong take him down at the end. However, Huodong shook his head, explaining, "A peak 5th-level martial artist, with a blood energy level of 1,000 and supported by internal energy. It's not that easy to wear him down." Besides, Huodong's gaze shifted, landing on another student standing next to the entrance, who seems innocent just standing there having trouble getting the boba from his drink. But Huodong could feel that the student who hadn't made a move yet was probably even stronger, possibly already at the 6th level. The faces of the new students beside him all showed shock and fear. They had never heard of a student reaching the 6th level before. A 6th-level martial artist is qualified to be a chairman of the Martial Arts Association in their respective cities. The orange-shirted reminded everyone not to forget which university they are attending. He reiterated his previous statement for the newcomers. Anyone who could withstand 3 of his attacks could enter, and if they could withstand 5, they could bring in their luggage as well. Raising his arms towards the crowd, he stated that while they might be martial arts prodigies among their peers, their past glories meant nothing here. In all of the 7 divine martial universities, strength ruled above all, and everything one desired had to be fought for with their own 2 hands. Holding a bunch of defeated students' room cards in his hand, he dropped them on the ground, telling everyone that without strength, they might as well go back home and live an ordinary person's life. His lips curled up into a cold smile as he spoke word by word. "This, as your respected senior at the 7th Divine Martial University, is the first lesson that I will be teaching to you." His words were like nails, deeply ingraining themselves into the hearts of the young freshmen. They lowered their heads in silence, their eyes flickering with various emotions. There was humiliation, unwillingness, but most of all, self-doubt, and a profound sense of confusion about their future path. Lu Sheng frowned as he watched the man at the entrance, feeling a slight irritation rising within him. It seemed like every time he went somewhere, there would always be some people jumping out to preach life lessons or the law of the jungle to him. His ears were practically calloused from hearing it so much. And frustratingly, the ones preaching were usually not very strong themselves, the kind he could easily swat away with a single slap. It was truly exasperating. The chubby boy, Lin Zhe, standing beside Lu Sheng, seemed very excited. He eagerly expressed his enjoyment of trampling on these self-righteous seniors and reveling in their shocked and fearful gazes. Putting down his suitcase, he was about to try it out himself. Lu Sheng looked at him in slight surprise. Lin Zhe took off his backpack and handed it to Lu Sheng. Turning to Lu Sheng, he grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. He told Lu Sheng that he was this year's top martial scholar from Sichuan province and ranked 19th in the nation. With that, he stepped forward through the crowd towards the orange shirt, shouting, "What's up with these stupid rules? Stop with y'all nonsense. It's too late to beg for mercy and watch Daddy kick your stupid ass and teach you a real lesson." The next moment, a flash of white light illuminated the area as a burst of energy appeared. Lindsay's figure, like a sandbag, was swiftly sent flying back, crashing heavily 7 meters away before rolling another 10 meters like a ball. Although he landed on the ground, Lindsay was not injured. He touched his buttocks and admitted his carelessness, saying the orange shirt guy was stronger than he thought. Seeing the look Lu Sheng gave him, Lindsay's face turned red. Lu Sheng smiled and patted Lindsay on the shoulder. Afterward, Lu Sheng walked towards the orange shirt guy. The crowd's gaze instantly converged on him. The orange shirt locked eyes with Lu Sheng. Lu Sheng lifted his arm and rubbed his wrist, thinking to himself that if there was a problem, he should just solve it. If a fly is too noisy, he should just swat it away. Lu Sheng, with his backpack slung over his shoulder, told the young man in the orange shirt that he was ready whenever. Instantly, all eyes in the crowd focused on Lu Sheng. The orange shirt looked down at Lu Sheng from above, his gaze sweeping over the backpack on Lu Sheng's back, his expression teasing as he questioned if Lu Sheng planned to take on his 3 attacks just like that. If was just then, Lu Sheng had realized something. He put down his backpack and snapped his wrists, calmly stating, "Now, we can start." The onlookers whispered among themselves, commenting on how naive and ignorant Lu Sheng was of the danger he was in. They wondered if Lu Sheng couldn't see that his opponent was a 5th-level martial artist capable of using internal energy. They shook their heads as if they had already foreseen Lu Sheng being beaten and limping away. The young man in orange smirked, a cold glint in his eyes, as he licked his lips and said, "I'll show you what true cruelty is." Before his words had fully faded away, he launched a kick as sharp as a blade. The energy wave was dense and tangible, tearing through the air and producing a piercing howl. This kick created a small whirlwind on the spot, causing the nearby freshmen unable to open their eyes and slowly retreat. However, Lu Sheng wasn't bothered at all. He simply extended one of his hands and reached straight for the young man's face. For some reason, Lu Sheng's grab seemed very slow. Everyone could clearly see every detail of his movement. Yet surprisingly, Lu Sheng's hand shattered the energy wave, and in the blink of an eye, Lu Sheng was already in front of the young man's face. The young man in orange struggled, saying, "Let me go." But Lu Sheng's hand felt like a deep black hole, instilling an indescribable sense of immense fear in him. Lu Sheng exerted a bit of force and grasped the young man's neck tightly before, with a fierce swing downward. Boom! The ground cracked open, and large cracks spread across the hard cement surface. The young man in orange lay on the ground like a dead dog, his body twitching slightly. The freshmen were all stunned, frozen in place. Lindsay, the chubby boy, had his mouth wide open, wide enough to fit a fist. Lu Sheng simply brushed the dust off his clothes. The other senior student who had been standing nearby was also stunned as if he hadn't recovered from the scene that had just unfolded. Holding his drink, he stared blankly at Lu Sheng. However, the moment he exchanged glances with Lu Sheng, his body instantly tensed up. He felt like prey that had been targeted by a fierce predator, appearing somewhat frightened. Lu Sheng's gaze fell on him. "Can I go in now?" he asked. With his hands in his pockets, the senior gently nodded, and Lu Sheng calmly walked in. Finding his room card, Lu Sheng casually pulled out a room card and tossed it to Lindsay just outside of the entrance, saying casually, "Let's go, Chub." Lindsay subconsciously caught the card Lu Sheng threw at him. As he looked at the room card that shimmered in the sunlight, he seemed to snap out of a daze. He quickly picked up Lu Sheng's backpack and, carrying his own suitcase, hurried to catch up. The two of them walked into the dormitory area, one after the other. Behind them, there was a still silence. Everyone was confused as to why the long-haired senior didn't take action. Could it be that even he was unable to defeat Lu Sheng? Watching Lu Sheng enter the dormitory area, the long-haired senior picked up his phone and made a call. "Hello, Brother Chen. I'm afraid someone extraordinary has joined us this year." Lu Sheng wandered around the residential area for a while, finally finding the living quarters corresponding to the room number on the card in his hand. To his surprise, the student housing at the 7th Divine Martial University consisted of individual villas. The size of this dormitory was almost comparable to the luxury mansion Lu Sheng had recently purchased for his family, and what's more, everything here was free for Lu Sheng. Lin Zhe, who was dragging luggage, cautiously told Lu Sheng not to go to the wrong place, indicating that it was the dorm of the national top scorer. Before he could finish speaking, something seemed to click in his mind, and he turned to Lu Sheng with a shocked expression, swallowing hard before asking, Are you Lu Sheng?" Lu Sheng just smiled at him. "Do I not look like it?" Lin Zhe burst out laughing, giving him a big thumbs up and saying, "You totally do." Lin Zhe theatrically wiped away a tear, saying that he, as the top martial scorer from his province, never expected to run into people like Lu Sheng right after entering the university. He confessed that he specifically chose to apply to the 7th Divine Martial University to avoid encountering big prodigies. He was thinking that the top prodigies would all opt for the more well-achieved divine martial universities. To his surprise, Lu Sheng, the national top scorer this year, had chosen to come to the 7th Divine Martial University. Lu Sheng was somewhat puzzled. He remembered that Governor Xia had mentioned that all the 7 divine martial universities were equivalent. Turning to Lin Zhe, he asked why did he consider the 7th Divine Martial University weak. Lin Zhe scratched his head and explained that he wasn't too sure himself, but just hearing the number 7 makes it seem like the weakest. Moreover, historically, the national top scorers usually go to one of the older divine martial universities. Lin Zhe also looked up the results of the National University Martial Arts Competition over the years, and the 7th Divine Martial University occasionally ends up at the bottom. Lin Zhe then shrugged, saying, "So wouldn't you say it's the weakest?" Lu Sheng, however, was unconcerned. Regardless of its strength or reputation, might as well take things as they come. Opening the door to his dormitory, Lu Sheng waved at Lin Zhe, suggesting they could hang out later. Lu Sheng entered the residence and found that the interior was very well furnished. Even the sofa was made of beast leather. Curiosity piqued, he pressed a button on a remote control he found on the table, and a massive 4K screen lit up. Casually browsing through, he discovered it was a campus forum. The posts varied, ranging from strategies for conquering the Divine Tower to profiles of prominent figures on the 7th Divine Martial University ranking, and even live broadcasts of battles against level 5 beasts. One post in particular caught his eye. It was the hottest topic of the day, featuring a complete video of the battle between Chen Yixuan and Xiaolan for the title of top senior student at the 7th Divine Martial University, which had over 14 million views. Lu Sheng quickly realized that this forum was a goldmine for the latest intel. Judging from the comments under the pinned video, it seemed that Chen Yixuan and Xiaolan were currently the 2 strongest students at the 7th Divine Martial University. Lu Sheng clicked on the video. As the video played, 2 young men in their early 20s stood facing each other. One wielded a long saber while the other brandished a Chinese dao. They appeared to be in the campus square just inside the entrance of the university. However, just as things were getting interesting, a prompt popped up on the screen, stating that the 15-second preview had ended and he needed to register and pay with forum points to continue watching. Lu Sheng shook his head. It seemed that video websites were the same everywhere. At this point, Lu Sheng hasn't got his student ID yet, let alone have the means to register or earn forum points. He closed the video, went upstairs, and found a small open balcony with a panoramic view of the distant scenery. This spot was perfect for practicing his daily breathing exercises. Before coming to the university, he had prepared 30 glass vials of the latest supplements, which should suffice for his cultivation needs in the short term. After drinking the supplement, he felt a warm flow circulating within his body. Lu Sheng started practicing the second stage of the immortal golden body technique. Suddenly, a loud knocking sound disrupted his practice. Lu Sheng, who detested being disturbed during cultivation, what made him more annoyed was seeing his door damaged. Lu Sheng stood up expressionless and opened the door. Opening the door, he saw a tall young man with a mushroom haircut scrutinizing him. The young man disdainfully began to speak.
"So you are Luo!"
Before he could finish his sentence, he was sent flying like a cannonball, traveling over 20 meters before slamming heavily into a wall. The two other people with him were left stunned and speechless. "Learn how to knock on a door before coming to find me again," Lu Sheng's stern voice carried out as he slammed the door shut. The pair knocked on the door again, this time with a gentler touch. Lu Sheng appeared at the door for the second time, his eyes clouded with confusion as he looked at the two. The mushroom-haired dude who had been sent flying struggled to lift himself off the ground. He caught sight of his two companions staring back at him with faces stricken with terror and shock. The mushroom dude felt as though his ribcage might shatter from the impact. He thought to himself, wasn't Lu Sheng just a freshman? How could he be so powerful? His intention had only been to intimidate this freshman and make a name for himself. He had heard that Lu Sheng was this year's national top scorer. He didn't expect to end up in such a sorry state. Lu Sheng, growing impatient, questioned their purpose. Were the seniors here really interested in bullying the freshmen day in and day out? The two hastily took out a large box and some documents, including Lu Sheng's student ID and some daily necessities. They explained they were from the student union here to welcome the new freshmen. They explained the student card would grant Lu Sheng access to all the equipment at the 7th Divine Martial University, and he could receive a bottle of level 4 beast blood. Lu Sheng nodded in acknowledgement, impressed by the generous benefits of the Divine Martial University. However, Lu Sheng cast a skeptical glance at the senior he had just sent flying, doubting their intentions was merely to deliver warmth and goodwill. After all, the hostility from the senior earlier was obvious. It was clear he had intended to use Lu Sheng as a stepping stone to establish his dominance. The senior, covered in dust, with resentment flickering in his eyes and grievances written all over his face, waited as if expecting an apology. Lu Sheng tilted his head slightly, a powerful aura rising from him. "Were you expecting an apology?" Lu Sheng asked with an emotionless voice. The senior with the mushroom haircut quickly assured me that no apology was needed and that they would take their leave immediately. Before closing the door, Lu Sheng still expressed his thanks for the delivery. Then, the three of them almost fled from Lu Sheng's residence. Looking back at the villa behind them, each of their faces bore an expression of lingering fear. The mushroom hair had not anticipated being overpowered by a freshman with a single punch. The other two looked at their mushroom-haired classmates and made it clear they would not assist him in seeking revenge. They looked at him with eyes full of sympathy. Mushroom Hair coughed twice and gestured dismissively. He had no desire for revenge for now, remembering that even when he had encountered a 6th-level beast on a mission, he hadn't been injured as badly as by Lu Sheng's single punch. He deeply regretted trying to establish his authority through Lu Sheng, yet he couldn't just let the matter slide either. Suddenly, Lu Sheng's door opened again. Catching sight of Lu Sheng's gaze, they hurriedly said they were about to leave, babbling promises to fix his door and even making a show of calling someone to take care of it right away. Lu Sheng then returned to his room to continue watching the video with his student card. Now, Lu Sheng could clearly see the fight in 4K. One wielded a saber and was dressed in a crisp suit. The other wore a tank top paired with camouflage pants, brandishing a large Chinese dao. There was no chatter between them. They went straight into each other. Lu Sheng was curious about the extent of the abilities of these prodigies, representing the pinnacle of young martial artists in the nation. The two fought back and forth, and Lu Sheng's expression turned serious as he watched. They were indeed very strong. Lu Sheng made some calculations with his fingers. Without using the power of a grandmaster's will, he estimated he would need to use at least 60%. No, more like 50% of his strength to defeat them. Considering that Lu Sheng's internal energy had recently reached a minor completion, which was conservatively estimated to elevate his combat power of over 2 million, even 50% of his strength cannot be underestimated. Ultimately, the student in the suit, Chen Yixuan, emerged victorious. Both of them were clearly not yet grandmasters, but already extremely close. Perhaps there were others even stronger than them at the other 6 divine martial universities. Lu Sheng had heard from Lindsay that enrollment at the 7th Divine Martial University was not always ideal. All of the previous national top scorers had all enrolled in other divine martial universities. Lu Sheng had always been in Dongning Province, This was his first time coming to the royal capital. Reflecting on the abundance of prodigious talent in the world, he acknowledged the need to push himself even harder. As one video ended, the next began to play automatically, a freshly uploaded clip. The video's title proclaimed, "The strongest freshman in the history of the 7th Divine Martial University. Beats up senior ranked in the top 300 on the first day of school." Indeed, the video chronicled the scene Lu Sheng had just enacted at the residential area entrance, where he had overpowered the senior in the orange shirt. In the footage, Lu Sheng effortlessly shattered the senior's attack, grabbed the senior by the neck and slammed him down. Reflecting on it, it did seem rather violent. The editor of the video seemed to have a peculiar sense of humor, turning the latter half of the video into a kind of meme. The clip repeatedly showed the senior being thrashed to the ground by Lu Sheng with bang, bang, bang sound effects with musical rhythms. It was quite pitiful to watch. In the barrage of comments and live chat, viewers spammed KEKWLUL and PogChamp. Lu Sheng was rather speechless as he watched the video, and a part of him felt sympathy for the senior. Just then, his stomach rumbled a reminder that it was time for a meal. Checking the time, he headed to the cafeteria to sample the culinary offerings of Divine Martial University. The university's cafeteria did not disappoint Lu Sheng. The place was bustling with students. Lin Zhe was there too, his arms laden with a variety of foods, skewers, meats from different beasts, and an assortment of snacks and dim sums. He approached Lu Sheng with a smile, asking him to not make fun of him for eating this much. Then Lin Zi saw the food on Lu Sheng's table was no less abundant than his, and Lu Sheng was seen engulfing a burger taller than a man in one bite, like a monster consuming its prey. Lin Zi shoveled a mouthful of food and glanced surreptitiously around, informing Lu Sheng that many people were watching him. At the table opposite, 2 senior female students were whispering praises about Lu Sheng, one of them even casting flirtatious glances his way. At another table, the sentiment was not as favorable. Some students from the same grade who knew the person whom Lu Sheng had beaten up in the video were eager to test their mettle against Lu Sheng. Lin Zhe envied the attention, while Lu Sheng continued eating, unfazed. The atmosphere in the cafeteria shifted when several individuals stood up and made their way toward Lu Sheng's table. The crowd's attention turned towards them. 4 individuals halted before Lu Sheng. The leader, also a freshman, extended his hand in a cold smirk, greeting Lu Sheng and introducing himself as Luke, ranked 17th nationwide this year. Lindsay's expression tensed as he sensed their malicious intent and was about to stand, but Lu Sheng's words kept him seated, telling him to continue eating. Lu Sheng ignored Luke and carried on with his meal, asking if Luke had come specifically to disclose his exam scores. Abaldi seemed rattled by Lu Sheng's dismissive demeanor but was stopped by Luke. Luke narrowed his eyes at Lu Sheng and started to laugh, saying he knew he was no match for Lu Sheng. However, he began to hint at the importance of social relationships in this environment, different from the previous high school, telling Lu Sheng he should know his place. However, before Luke could finish, Lu Sheng interrupted him. If Luke acknowledged he was not a match for Lu Sheng, why provoke him? Caught off guard by the question, Luke watched as Lu Sheng calmly placed his chopsticks down and pushed his plate forward slightly, preparing to stand up. In an instant, the expressions of Luke and his companions darkened. Anticipating hostility, Luke launched the initial attack, but Lu Sheng was quicker. He reached out, his hand aiming for Luke's head in a familiar motion reminiscent of the earlier video clip. With a single-handed grip as if catching a ball, Lu Sheng pressed Luke to the ground. The cafeteria echoed the dominance Lu Sheng had displayed in the meme-worthy footage they had all seen.